Alrighty, welcome everyone. Welcome. Just going to give a minute or two for people to filter in. Welcome, Laura. Thank you. I will introduce you. Laura Black's been a Pardot user since 2011. So before Salesforce knew anything about Pardot. She is a 4-time Salesforce MVP, and her Twitter handle is PardotPro on Twitter. And of course, she hails from Austin, Texas. Welcome, Laura.
Yeah, thanks. It's been a fun few years. Yeah. So I started using Pardot back when I was a marketing assistant. My VP of marketing came to me and it's like, hey, I went to this conference and we're going to buy this thing called Pardot and you're going to learn how to use it. So I was like, oh, I better go get a notepad and start taking notes.
We call that an accidental admin.
Yeah. There wasn't, we weren't even Pardashians at the time. That didn't even exist as a name. So.
All right. Well, once again, welcome everyone. We have some people still filtering in here. Got a great group here. You are in the automate all things in account engagement. So if that's what you were looking for, then you're in the right place. I do encourage you after this to check out. We have a really packed 3 days of really awesome sessions. So would encourage you to check out the agenda, make sure you see what we have available. But I'm going to turn it over to Laura now. If you have any questions, please put them in the Q&A up at the top there on the right-hand side. We also have our session chat open, and I'll be putting a few notes in there throughout the session. But go ahead, Laura, take it away.
All right. So welcome everyone to Automate All the Things in Account Engagement, aka Pardot. You are going to hear me call it Pardot just because I've been a Pardot user since 2011 and it's just stuck in my brain. But this session is really designed to talk about, what are the things that you as a marketing person can do that doesn't involve code? How can you resolve some of your problems with Pardot without writing a line of code? And there's a lot you can do just inside of Pardot to fix up some problems, to set yourself up for success. So we are going to kick off with thanks to our awesome sponsors. I've used a lot of these in my time. Stencil I'm actually a current client of Stencil, and PFL is a great company. I don't know all of them, but thank you to all of our awesome sponsors. So we are going to talk about a few big points. Data cleaning with Engagement Studio. Fun fact, as Mike Cruiser likes to say, you don't have to send email with Engagement Studio. It doesn't have to send email, although that is what we think about it in terms of nurturing. You can leverage it for many more things. I'm going to talk about creating a master suppression list. And I'm also going to talk about competitor handling and a couple of other helpful dynamic lists. I'm going to talk a little fast because this is a lot to cover in our time. But please go ahead and put your questions in the chat. If I see them, I'll answer them, but otherwise we'll do questions at the end. So data cleaning with Engagement Studio. So this really stems from what I call Laura hates to do things over and over and over again. So really common scenario, someone sends you an Excel file. They're like, hey, get this into Pardot. We're going to want to, nurture them, or we're going to go to an event. Here's the list of people we need to invite to meet us at the event. So what do you have to do every time you get one of these Excel files is you have to look it over, correct the data, most commonly states and countries. Maybe you have some other tedious fields you always need to be filled in. But you have to do this data correction before you can import it to Pardot. Otherwise, your system is all out of sync. And if you wanted to send an email to everybody in Florida, you have to create a really tedious list or do data cleaning later. So let's talk about what you can do to set yourself up so you don't have to do these tedious things over and over. So to dive into this, to create an engagement studio that's going to save you all this time, just set yourself up, do a quick look, see what are the correct values you need for Salesforce. So we're going to talk about correcting states and countries. So you need what are the values that Salesforce wants for state and countries. You're going to create a dynamic list for each of those. You're going to create an engagement studio, and then you're going to take some time and build out that engagement studio with a lot of rule checks and then actions of changing values. So let's take a quick look. I do have some handy downloads for you. On my website, I have these as text files. So if you want the US states, you can get a list of the US states. If you want a list of the countries, you can get the country values as a quick download. And this will circulate later, so we can definitely, you don't have to try and type every single one of these. But basically, for your dynamic list for states, you're going to make a dynamic list that says the prospect default field for state is not empty, and the default field for country is United States, and then a series of the prospect default field state is not, and then you're going to have all of the correct state values in it. And that's where that previous screen, that list comes in handy. So this is what it looks like. In Pardot, you have the option to, it says isn't, not is not, but same concept in the box. You have the ability to type in the exact state values. So Alabama semicolon in Pardot language is an or. So it's state isn't Alabama, isn't Alaska, isn't Arizona. And you're going to do a match all on these. So you're not accidentally hitting like Germany and their state is, AR or something like that. You want to hit the exact right segment of people. So filter the ones that are incorrect. So you know that they're in the United States, you know they have a state value. State value is not empty, but it's not hitting one of the correct state values, Alabama, Alaska, Arizona, et cetera, et cetera. District of Columbia should probably be in there. So this is going to be your dynamic list, which is going to be the recipient list, even though we're not sending any emails. But you're going to use that dynamic list as the recipient list of your engagement studio program. And you're just going to build out a series of repeating steps. A yellow step, which is listening or checking a field value. That yellow step creates a yes-no branch. And on the yes path, if they meet the criteria, I'm going to show you that in a second, then you're going to correct the data on the blue path. And then you're going to add a red end step, meaning that person who met that value now exits the program. And you're going to do this very left-hand branching program, and it's going to have what I call the ultimate no path. Somebody met the dynamic list, but did not meet the other values and get corrected. So they went down the ultimate no path, and something's wrong with them. So they didn't meet the exact criteria. They didn't get corrected. So that step has a notify user, which is usually me, to say, hey, Laura, something's wrong with your engagement studio program. So zoomed out, this is what this looks like. So I said it's recipient program at the start, and then it goes down to a yellow step. Is the field value, does it begin with AL, Alabama? Is it the 2-letter code, et cetera, et cetera. And so it'll just correct the state values and just exit on those red steps. And then notice how it builds down into the left, like I said. So here's where, the zoomed in view, we start with the recipient who meets the dynamic list. Their state value is equal to AL. So this is the 2-letter Alabama, right? So we know that we want to correct it on the yellow. The yellow makes a branch, yes or no. And on the yes, the state value is exactly AL. We know we want to change it to Alabama because that's the 2-letter state code for Alabama. We didn't say prospect field begins with AL because that could match Alaska. We say it is Alabama, AL, right? Exact 2-letter match. Those 2-letter matches we're going to correct to Alabama. And that's the yes, the blue gets added to the yes step, and then you just end them on that path because they don't need to go down the other logic checks. Some people build this as a bunch of looping around, but you don't need to build out. They don't need to go down all those 50 plus steps. Just let them end, and that saves you a lot of time. So you just kind of continue down. On the no path, you build out the next step. You build out, is the state AK? That's Alaska. On the yes path, change to Alaska, so on and so on, and just keep building. It is a little tedious, but what I'll say is that Engagement Studio does have a copy steps program. So I encourage you to take advantage of that. You're going to copy a blank yellow step. You're going to copy the blue step and so on and so on. So save yourself some time and copy those steps, and then you'll just have to open them each and put in the correct values and so on and so on. So this is the very far left path of the program, what I call the ultimate no. So if they made it through all those logic checks and still didn't meet a yellow one and go down a yes path, they're going to hit my ultimate no path. No, they didn't meet any of these logic checks. And it's going to send me a Pardot email, a notification that, hey, this person did something in this engagement studio. And I name my engagement studio something very obvious. It's like correct US states or something like that. So if I get a notification that says, Laura, somebody, is notifying you, I know that I should open up that prospect and figure out what went wrong. Maybe I forgot to include, Wyoming. Maybe I forgot to fill in Michigan, or I duplicated something and left those steps out somewhere. Great. I can just run them through this program. I'll get notified, and eventually I get no more notifications unless something is really, really wrong with their data. Like their country said United States and state wasn't empty, but they actually are supposed to be in Germany or United Kingdom or something like that. In which case I'll go in, I'll open up those people and I'll change their country to be actually correct. So this kind of builds in those checks for you that you did it correctly. And that when somebody does actually notify you, it's actually something that's actually wrong. So this again is the full view zoomed out. So remember, like it's building down and to the left to get to your ultimate no path. That's super handy. And so that was states. Countries is very similar, although there's a lot more countries. So it's really the dynamic list for countries is the prospect default field for country is not empty, and you're going to put in the correct values of countries. So again, we'll circulate slides so that you can grab those lists from my website. But I grabbed the list of countries from, like, if you have state and country pick lists set up for Salesforce, I grabbed the countries that Salesforce is going to want you to match. So you can quickly grab those. So again, you're going to have a lot of these, at the very top, default field countries, not empty, but then you're going to have a lot of these country isn't, American Samoa, South Korea, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So you're going to have a lot of those. And I believe my list builds it out for you. So you have those groups and can just copy and paste it. And then again, you're just going to build this same dynamic list. But what I would tell you is you probably don't need to build a step for every country. Your company probably does business with just a few countries. And so if you create your dynamic list and let it, before you build the engagement program, create your dynamic list and let it send you the email that says, here's your dynamic list. And then you export that. You're going to get a view of, here are the most common incorrect countries. So you can kind of pick and choose which countries do you need to build to begin with. So Australia, country default field country is, and it's the 2-letter AU. That's Australia. So the blue step is going to say change to Australia, and so on and so on. And again, this program ends with a notify user. So if to build this program out, I created only 10 countries because that was what my initial dynamic list said. Hey, you have misspellings on these 10 countries. Maybe as time goes on, now I have a incorrect country that wasn't built into my program. Now I can go and I can edit my program and I can add those steps because it seems like I'm going to need them. So eventually you'll be pretty solid on this list, but yeah, you don't need to build out a country data cleaning program for every country. Just focus on the ones that you see most common are problems and build this in. And prior boss of mine called this a washing machine. And basically every prospect who hits Pardot, which is pretty much every prospect in your database with an email address, is going to hit these. And often they would hit, sync errors in your sync queue. And what's nice about this is they're going to have a sync error, but they're actually going to get automatically cleaned. And then because Pardot is changing the field value, it puts them back in the sync queue to sync again. So it kind of solves a lot of your state and country mismatch sync errors from Salesforce without you having to do it manually. So it's tedious to set up, but it saves you so much time because now when you have those event lists, hey, I went to this event and here's the CSV, you don't have to spend time cleaning the state and country fields every single time you get a list. You can just move on, upload, import the list of email addresses with the fields into Pardot, and Pardot will take care of cleaning it as you import it into Pardot, account engagement. So it saves you so much time. And like I said, this is born out of Laura hates doing these things over and over and over again. And it's not a single line of code. Jessica's asking, in your program, do you check the box to allow a prospect to enter the program more than once? I don't, because a field value change like this should persist. They shouldn't be changing countries back to the wrong spelling. You can if you suspect there's a problem, but honestly, they should never need to repeat this program. But you can, but you only have like 10 programs that are allowed to repeat. So I tend to leave that off because I think a data change shouldn't change once it's fixed. Okay, so we're going to talk about other time-saving things. So master suppression list. How many times do you send an email? Is there a max about how many criteria I can put in one dynamic list? I don't think so. I did hit a maximum on automation rules, but I've never hit a maximum on dynamic lists. And I think the country one, I think I hit like 13 rules in it. And because of how I grouped all of the countries, and that was no problem. I've also done like just a super, super long dynamic list and never hit a maximum. So if you hit a maximum, I'd be very surprised because I've never hit a max since I've been using Pardot since 2011. But if you do, you would deserve an award for hitting a maximum. Okay, so master suppression list. We're going to talk about saving yourself some time as you're building emails. So my nurture programs, if I have an evergreen nurture program, I'm always going to want to suppress similar things. So I'm going to want to suppress my company's employees from dropping into the nurture program and skewing my numbers. I'm going to want to suppress any competitors. I'm going to want to suppress any people who are already unmailable so that they don't skew my numbers of like, hey, this many people entered the program, but they weren't actually sent any emails. So how does the Excel you mentioned get grabbed to go into the engagement studio? So you will download the text file and it has everything you need to build the dynamic list yourself. So you can't like upload the Excel file and create a dynamic list. You just need to like copy and paste the rows into the dynamic list that I said. So sorry, I'm going to stop answering questions about engagement programs. So I'm getting sidetracked. But so building a master suppression list saves you a lot of time, because you're going to create one, maybe two master suppression lists that you're going to use on all of your email sends. So instead of having to manually remember to add like 15 different suppression lists to a newsletter email or to a nurture program, you're just going to grab the one suppression list that's called like master suppression list or master exclusion list for nurture programs. You're going to know what to grab every single time. So instead of having to remember to suppress every single separate list, roll it all up into one master suppression list. And I'm not kidding when I say my master suppression list often has like 20 subsets of other lists. So maybe I'll make a dynamic list in Pardot that says, this is all of my company's employees. And that list is made up of, prospect default field email ends with @extensushr.com. That's my list, a dynamic list of all of my employees. If they show up in Salesforce or they fill out one of my website forms, they're going to automatically match that dynamic list. Now make another suppression list, make another dynamic list that rolls up all of these people into one. So you can literally say, make a naming convention for your list that groups them all together. So I frequently start them with ZZZ because that sends them to the very bottom of my list alphabetically. But I'll say like ZZZ-suppression competitors or something like that so that I know exactly what they're for. So this is what the master suppression list looks for. I'm going to say prospect list is a member of current clients, or they are a member of junk email addresses, or they are a member of my employees, or they are a member of my competitors. So I make all these different dynamic lists, automatically searching Pardot and matching them if they have the email domain of my competitors, or they are one of my deleted records from Salesforce, or they're one of my current clients. And all of these are dynamic lists. So because I want them to automatically update, and then they'll join that dynamic list. Then they'll also join my master suppression list a little bit later. So this is great. These are going to be a match any, so you're an or. They don't have to be a member of my clients and my competitors and my employees, because that's never going to happen. You want them to be a member of any one of these lists, or this other list, or this other list. So this saves you a lot of time. And I might have a master suppression list for my newsletters, and then a different suppression list for my nurture programs, because maybe I actually want my current clients to go into a nurture program about, hey, you're up for renewal or something like that. So just be aware of what's in each list and make them correctly. I'm going to show you how to do competitor handling. So we all know people kind of panic, and our stakeholders kind of panic about, like, what if one of our competitors, is on our newsletter list? And like, honestly, it's not that big a deal. Like, go join your competitor's newsletter list and see what they're promoting. But your competitors kind of cost you money, because in Pardot account engagement, you have these contact blocks, right? And every additional 10,000 contacts, mailable prospects, costs you money. So you want to make your competitors unmailable, because they're sitting there in your database as a mailable prospect, counting against your contact blocks. And you could constantly send them to the recycle bin, but if they come to your website and fill out another form or something like that, that'll pull them out of the recycle bin automatically. So kind of, I like to ignore them, and I just mark them as unmailable, so they're not eating up my prospect seats. So this is different. I'm not going to make a dynamic list, although I can, and I do in my last series. I just showed you how to make the, make a dynamic list. But because I want to do something to the competitors, I'm going to create an automation rule. So very easy criteria. The prospect default field for the email address ends with @company.com. So your competitor at competitor.com. And the automation rule is going to change the default field called do not email to true. So literally I'm marking them as opted out. It's actually like technically considering them a bounce, so they can't like opt back in, but it's super, super convenient. So the other thing is that you might have competitors filling out things with a Gmail address, and you're like, well, I don't want to suppress everyone with a Gmail address. Okay, so what you can do is, if you see those as a one-off, that John Doe is a competitor because you recognize the name and they use their real name. You can just go apply a Pardot tag, call it, competitor as the tag. And then instead of just prospect default field email ends with company, you can say, or prospect tag is competitor. And now those ones that you manually tag as competitors will also hit the automation rule and also get opted out. So that's really good. And then if you have, other things that you never want to email people who are like the student intern or, the summer intern or, somebody's executive assistant or something like that, create additional things to make them match this rule and mark them as opted out, because you don't need them sitting there and eating up your database limits and costing you money. Just mark them as do not email is true, and that takes them out of your mailable database counts. So I'm going to do other helpful dynamic lists. So whenever I start a new job or I spent a couple of years as a consultant, I would go into the Pardot account and I would make dynamic lists showing who are my unmailable prospects. So I would make dynamic lists for, the people who are opted out, the people who are bounced, and the people who I have marked as do not email, which is like, they didn't opt out, they didn't bounce, but I don't actually want to send them. It's sort of the equivalent of a bounce, but it's like an extra thing. Like my competitors, I mark them as do not email. So this is a really simple series of dynamic lists. This is the first thing you're going to pick in the dynamic list is prospect email status is, and then that final option gives you these choices. You can choose opted out, you can choose bounce, you can choose do not email. So just make a separate list for each of these, and then you can kind of get a count for like, how many of these people are opted out versus bounce? How many have I marked do not email? Because you might have 100,000 people in your database and it's 75% mailable, but how many of them are bounced? How many are opted out? These are the dynamic lists that'll give you those answers. So they're really, really easy to build. Like I said, you just pick this first option for prospect email status, just say is, I don't think you have any choices in there, and just pick one of these, opted out, do not email. I jumped ahead. But anyway, you can see how you can build these unmailable prospect lists. I did make a dynamic list for my competitors. So I made an automation rule to change a field value That's all well and good, but maybe I want to create a dynamic list for other purposes. Like maybe I want to send them to my recycle bin. Maybe I want to monitor how many of my competitors are coming in. Dynamic lists can help you with that. So just like building the automation rule, you're going to do criteria for prospect default field, email ends with, your @company.com, or these other, the company name is, Amazon. The company name is, whatever your competitors are. And then again, do your, prospect tag is competitor. So if you see one or two as a competitor, you can just apply the tag and then they'll hit this dynamic list. So this is a really convenient way if you're, wanting to send them to the recycle bin. Here's all your competitors at once. Go visit this list, send them all to the recycle bin, get rid of them.
Hey, Laura.
Yes.
I just wanted to give you a heads up that we're at about 4 minutes.
Sure, I'm good. So this is again how you make your dynamic lists for employees of your own company. So again, maybe you have a tag where you have a test list where you and your coworkers use your Gmail addresses. Maybe you tag those with employees, and so you create a dynamic list, which is the employees of your own company. So email ends with mycompany.com, or their tag is employees, kind of on and on. So here, I did see in the chat somebody was saying, how do I make a list of people who have been deleted from Salesforce? So we all know, we hate it that sales team members do it, but they do delete people out of Salesforce. It's super annoying. It creates sync errors in Salesforce. This is how you do it. The choice in the dynamic list is prospect CRM status is, and you have contact, lead, or has been deleted from Salesforce. So just make a dynamic list for this. This is how you grab the ones who've been deleted from Salesforce. And then another good one is your junk email addresses. So we know that people fill in, disposableaddress.com, junk mail. So this is a dynamic list that grabs all the junk mail addresses for you. Again, this is a really great one to build into your automation rule to mark them unmailable, because they're just going to sit there and eat up your database. If you have a really robust gated content strategy, this one is going to grab all of the junk mail addresses and let you mark them unmailable right away. And again, there's a list of junk mail domains that you can grab from my website. So that is all of the fun dynamic lists and everything that you can build without writing a single line of code, but that can save you a lot of time. Were there any questions that I didn't jump to as they went through?
Yeah, hi Laura. A lot of activity in the Q&A and in the chat. Just going through that now. Some of them are more questions like getting Excel files into Engagement Studio. We can talk about. We can address that offline. So I'm just reading this one. I work for a nonprofit that provides services to other nonprofits. We use Pardot for marketing purposes, but we also use Salesforce list emails for programmatic emails.
Yeah.
I'm just going to skim through this. What happens is that we get Pardot emails and it bounces because it picked up by their email provider as spam. Any way to prevent this and automating it when it happens? I'm not sure I understand. Yeah,
I think I'd need to do a walkthrough with somebody to understand what's going on. There are some people, so nonprofits have a very there is a session on nonprofits with Pardot and account engagement. I encourage you to ask your question there, because there are some people who specialize in the nonprofit, service pack and Pardot and the intricacies involved. And I'm not sure the involvement in the, list emails from Salesforce question.
Yeah. All right. A couple questions about the max criteria in an automation, and I was gonna look that up to confirm the answer. Yeah. I thought it was for some reason I thought it was 24. I have that number in my head.
That's for if you're sending an email with dynamic lists. I believe there's a maximum of dynamic content. I believe there's a maximum of 12 pieces of dynamic content. But the actual criteria lines in an automation rule or dynamic list, I hit them once in an automation rule and never again. And I ended up just building it as a dynamic list instead. Dynamic list has a much longer, like larger set of criteria that you can add to a dynamic list.
Awesome. Well, we are about to get cut off. So thank you
Yep.
everyone for joining. Thank you,
Bye,
Laura.
everyone.